Hello, happy Monday. Thank you for joining me tonight. So tonight we have a really interesting topic. I was planning on being home to do this presentation, but my appointment in Albuquerque ran over a little bit, so I figured I'd just use the parking lot in my car. So if you are joining and you can hear this, please give me a thumbs up so that I know. If you can't hear me, if you write it in the comments, and that way I know you can't hear me. That would be great too. So hopefully the sound is good. All right. So tonight's topic is, what are the foods we want to eat during perimenopause? Like, are there foods that are, like superfoods? Because if you followed me for a while, you know that I do not really buy into that whole hype of superfoods. There are foods that are more nutritious, but I mean, that's really what we want to strive to eat all the time. There's not a magical food. But during perimenopause, it is important, it's always important, but it's very important right now that we pay attention to our nutrition, because we really need to. If we are paying attention to our nutrition, it's very balanced, we're going to work on improving overall health. If it's very balanced, we're going to work on preserving our bones and our muscles and our tendons and our ligaments, and those things all become very, very important the older that we get. Like, we don't really think about it, earlier in life, we're immortal and we're just going to continue living the way that we're living and have no repercussions, but that's not the truth. So as we get older, our nutrition becomes even more vital. So there are some specific foods that are definitely our friends during this time in life. Hi Brenda, hi Katie, Karen, it's nice to see you. If you ladies have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I will make sure that I get those taken care of tonight. But when we go through this process, there's a lot of change that happens, right, in our hormones. So we have things going up, we have things going down, we have sometimes things going haywire. Sometimes balance is really off, sometimes hormones are completely gone. And so there are not foods, like there's no food that's going to bring back your hormones. So I do want to clear that up right now. But there are foods that are going to support our body and supply nutrients so that our body can continue making hormones to the best of its ability right now. Like, obviously nothing's going to replace hormone replacement therapy, not even supplements. So what foods are those? Well, we want to really hone in on things like whole foods. So we do want to try to avoid processed foods, refined foods, sugar, caffeine. Those kind of things can cause some issues as we go through this change. So avoiding or minimizing those at least can be a really good start for a lot of us. And then, swapping out those things for things that are whole and nutritious. We need carbohydrates. I know in this age group, like, I think women have this huge tendency to just diet a lot anyhow, right? But in this age group, there's a real big tendency to take out all the carbohydrates because, that'll equal weight loss. But we need carbohydrates. We need them for our muscle. We need them. Your brain alone needs 130 grams of carbohydrates. Your hormones need carbohydrates. And another key factor for carbohydrates is that it helps us to regulate cortisol production. This is something that is very, very important. I think I talk on this every single time we talk about menopause, because if we're not caring for cortisol production at this stage of the game, it is just running amok, and it's too high, or it's been too high for too long and now it's too low. So if we are using a smart nutritional approach, we can strategically use carbohydrates to help us with this condition that we have with cortisol. So carbohydrates. So you want to think like whole food carbohydrates first of all. So we want to have grains, we want to have berries, vegetables. Legumes are carbohydrates, not such a great source of protein. Those are going to be like our whole food carbohydrates. The fruits, the vegetables, the grains, and legumes. And we want those. Now, that is not to say that we can't have things like bread and pasta and pastries and cake, because we can. We just have to prioritize the other foods and make sure that our body's been fed in the manner that it needs at this time before we go indulging in those things. And then, monitoring our indulgence in those things too is probably a good idea. But so carbohydrates, and then we really want to also prioritize protein. If we're not prioritizing protein at this stage of the game, we are missing out on a whole, sorry, there's someone behind where I'm parked. If we are not prioritizing protein at this stage of the game, we are missing out on a lot of benefits. Protein plays a role in hormone production. Protein keeps you satiated, so it keeps you feeling full for longer, so you're not feeling like you're starving if you're dieting. Protein is going to help keep the muscle that you have, and if we're getting insufficient protein, it will help us increase our muscle mass, which is going to help increase our bone density. So we want to get protein. There's thousands of places we can get protein. We can absolutely use legumes, but again, just remember they're not that great. They're two parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein. There are other things like we can use tofu. There's tempeh, so soy is a good source, and soy is also a good source. I'll get into that in a minute. What else do we like to use? Tofu, tempeh. Seitan can be used. Do keep in mind that seitan is something that we make at home. It is made out of wheat, so if you have a wheat allergy, then it's probably something you don't want to use. If you're having gut issues, you probably want to keep the seitan out for a while, but it can be a really good source of protein. And then some of my personal favorites are the pumpkin seed tofu, the fava bean tofu, the textured pea protein, TVP, the textured vegetable protein. Those are all really good sources of whole food proteins as well. And it's not hard to get what you need if you're putting effort into thinking about, what you're going to eat, not just waiting until you're starving and grabbing what's available. So those are all things that are great to have on hand. And then, filling in the gap with protein powder as needed. If you're not plant-based, it's way easier. You have tons more options for lean proteins. But I won't go into those tonight. And then we also really want to make sure that we're including our omega fatty acids. This is really important because this is crazy. I was just actually talking to someone else about this, but omega fatty acids are the only fat that crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it takes nutrients and helps transport nutrients into the brain. At this stage of the game, sometimes we are having brain fog. Sometimes we forget a lot of things. Maybe that's because we're depleted in carbohydrates and our brain isn't getting the amount that it needs. Maybe that's because that blood-brain barrier is getting a little inflexible because we're not getting enough omega fatty acids in. So sources of omega fatty acids would be algae oil as a supplement. Flax seeds have some, walnuts, chia seeds, and back to algae. So those are our top sources. If you're not plant-based, you could always, fish is a good source. That's not something I generally recommend, but it is a source. And it's crazy because the fish actually get their omega fatty acids from eating the algae. It's, kind of like, where do animals get their amino acids from? From the vegetables, from the grass, the grains that they're eating. Crazy, right? We have some more joining us, so thank you, ladies. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll make sure that I get them answered for you. But yeah, so we need carbohydrates, we need protein, we need omega fatty acids, phytonutrients. So phytonutrients can help during this time. Sometimes, depending on your particular hormone balance, they can make it worse. So proceed with caution in this area. Soy is going to contain phytonutrients. Or phytoestrogens, phytonutrients, we need those. Okay, let's back up here because I made a mistake. We need phytonutrients. Those are found, they're in very high concentrations in your things like berries. But phytoestrogens are something else that can help some women in perimenopause. So depends on where your hormones are at. If you need support with estrogen, phytoestrogens may help you. They also may not, but most of the women that I've talked to, it has helped them, provided that's what their body needs. Now, if someone is going through perimenopause and you are estrogen dominant, I would advise you to stay away from the phytoestrogen foods, and that's going to be things like soy. Is soy an estrogen containing food? No, but if you are eating high enough amounts of it, it can mimic the effects of estrogen. It isn't causing you to produce more estrogen. It is just supporting your body. So, but you would have to consume quite a bit of it, and it's actually easier to do that through supplementation. But again, I would not recommend doing that if you don't have labs and you don't know what hormones need to be supported. So those are our key players at this stage of the game. We want to also think a little bit about nutrient timing, because we can have really good intentions and we can be eating predominantly plant-based and predominantly whole foods. But if our meal timing is not optimal, it's going to create additional stress in our body. And when we create additional stress, then cortisol goes up again. And when cortisol goes up again, progesterone goes down again. And, we get stuck in that cycle where we're not feeling well and we know that something is off. So I do want to talk for a minute about nutrient timing. And I just want to check and make sure we don't have any questions. All right, so nutrient timing, we want to eat in the morning. Like when I started this conversation tonight, I talked a little bit about how women in this particular age group really like to remove carbohydrates. So we don't want to do anything low carb. And another big tendency that I see is the whole intermittent fasting craze, to where we, are pushing that eating window bigger and bigger, or the fasting window bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it leads to being able to eat once a day. So something that you need to keep in mind in this particular area is that the studies that support intermittent fasting were done on men, so not women, definitely not perimenopausal women. And the studies that were done on both intermittent fasting and just regular calorie restriction show that there is little to no benefit from intermittent fasting that you do not also get from basic calorie restriction. So you can get the same benefits of intermittent fasting just from being in a calorie deficit. So not starving yourself and still getting those same benefits of however small they are, as far as increasing growth hormone and autophagy and all of that. But what we want to focus in on right now is the timing of our meals. So we don't want to be fasting. We don't want to be intermittent fasting. We don't want to be eating one meal a day. If we want our body to be calm and to feel safe and to have that cortisol down and have our hormones in the most balanced place that we can have them, so that we can actually see weight loss or fat loss in that department, we want to ensure that we're feeding our body appropriately. So the best way to do that is to manipulate your carbohydrates. Like, you have to manipulate them. So we want, in the morning, we have that natural cortisol goes up, right? And then it is supposed to come back down. But what I see happens in this age group, and honestly with most women, is that, you get up, cortisol goes up, you have your coffee, you go to the gym. You don't eat anything until maybe you come home from the gym. Maybe you get something, maybe you don't. Maybe you wait until you're on your way to work. So like, our cortisol curve is going way, way out here, and it's still like high, right? It's still way up here because you didn't do anything to bring it down. You gave it coffee, which is going to increase that cortisol spike. Then you exercised, which is going to increase that cortisol spike. Then you didn't eat again after your exercise. So now your body's really stressed. Maybe you had some more coffee, and then you're waiting until lunch to eat. So your cortisol is just up here until you eat. And that can be, just changing that one thing can be enough to help women start seeing some progress right away without changing anything else. So what we want to do when we first get up is have something to eat. Like, don't just pour the coffee on your empty stomach. If you must have coffee in the morning, be sure that you're at least getting in some water and some electrolytes first, so that you're hydrating your body, especially if you're having night sweats. And then have your coffee, or have your water, have something small to eat, and then have coffee. But if you're working out, you must get something. You must have carbohydrates in before you exercise, or you are just compounding the issue where you're at. So some of the things that I like to recommend are, have some fruit in the morning, do a rice cake, have a piece of toast, yogurt. I love the silk soy yogurt, and that's what I have in the morning. It is perfect. It's a little bit of protein with some carbohydrates, and that helps to bring that cortisol down so that then when I go work out, it'll come back up, but that's okay because then I come home and I eat again. So I can use that carbohydrate to shove that cortisol back down so my body doesn't stay in a stressed state for like 6 hours. So that is like one of the biggest things that you can do to help regulate cortisol production and help your body start seeing, the fat loss that you've been working so hard for. And really there's nothing else to change at this point, but that is very, very important, is feeding yourself pre and post workout, especially if you are training in the morning. So that is about all we're going to dive into as far as nutrient timing goes tonight. We've covered, some specific foods, why the proteins are important, why the carbohydrates are important, why you maybe want to include phytoestrogen, why you maybe don't. I hope that this brought some value for you. I'll stay here, I have plenty of time, so I'll stay here for a few minutes. If you have questions, please drop them into the chat. I do have a guide that I wrote to go along with this training, so if you would like a copy of that, you can comment on the bottom of this video, or let myself know, let Justin know. We're more than happy to get that guide over to you. Inside of the guide, we also put a little shopping list, so when you go to the grocery store, you know that you can get these kind of proteins and get these kind of carbohydrates, and make sure that we're getting some berries and some vegetables and maybe some soy. And then there's a few supplements in there that we recommend too. Oh, something else we can touch on tonight is something that gets overlooked a lot. So as we go through this change, right, we have our hormones and they're going up, and they're literally going up and down, but our liver is responsible for processing out excess hormones, and you can have a blood test and have your liver enzymes come back fine, but that does not mean that your liver is functioning optimally. If those enzymes come back, not fine, then there's a problem that needs to be, dove into. But what we see is that if we can help support liver function, your body can clear out some of the excess hormones, and get those out. That is going to help your body achieve better overall hormone balance. So there are a few supplements at the end of the guide. One of them is our liver support supplement that I personally love. It's not harsh, so you're not doing like a liver detox. You're just helping the liver to flush out any extra toxicity that may be there. It works really well to flush out extra hormones that are there. And then something else that we like to use during this time is some digestive support. So a couple of reasons for that. We want to prioritize protein, so making sure that we're getting in a good amount of protein, but that can be challenging because as we're going through this, some of our digestive enzymes are declining. And because of that, it can be a little bit harder to digest protein. So getting some digestive support, like digestive enzymes, or there's a supplement that we like to use, it's called betaine HCI, that helps to increase stomach acid. So that's going to help you break down those proteins too. But if you want a good overall digestive enzyme, we do have one. It helps to digest all proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. So it's pretty well rounded. And then having a good probiotic on your side is always good at this time too. I mean, it's always good anyhow, but having a full spectrum probiotic is good as well. So we have one of those in the bottom of the guide as well. So you can order all of those direct from our sister company, Her Essentials. I am not seeing any questions, but like I said, if you ladies, if anybody, there's a lot of you on here. Thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions, go ahead and drop them into the chat. I will get back to you later after I get home. If you would like a copy of the guide, let me know here, and either myself or Jessica will make sure that you get a copy. If you would like to take a hormone assessment and just, get a picture of where your body's kind of sitting right now and what things you might need to work on to help your body, feel more balanced. Let me know. We have a hormone assessment. I would be happy to send that over to you, and then we could go over the results together. But I think that pretty much wraps this up. Thank you to each and every one of you that took the time to join me tonight. Thank you for sitting with me in my car. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I'll see you next week.